Hi, I'm Jared, and today I'll be reviewing How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. This book was published in 2019 by Melville House Press. As you can see, it's a pretty quick read. It's a slim volume, but there's a ton of really interesting insight and discussion and perspective contained in this book, and as a result, I highly recommend it. So the subtitle of Odell's book, How to Do Nothing, is Resisting the Attention Economy. And what Odell does in the book is she sketches a guide for reclaiming your attention, your intentions, and your actions in your everyday life from the forces of technology and of capital and of commerce that seek to monetize and control them. So that's a big, lofty agenda, right? Those are some big ideas, but she does a really good job at it in a relatively economical volume here. So as you can see, the subtitle is Resisting the Attention Economy. What, though, is the attention economy? Well, if you're viewing this on YouTube, you know exactly what the attention economy is. YouTube is a major network, a major component of the attention economy. It's a lot of things, really. It's the ubiquitous social media platforms that are designed to pull you in and capture your attention for as much time as possible in order to sell it for profit. It's also our increasingly online patterns of work and consumption. It's 24/7 email, it's 24/7 shopping, making every waking second a unit of value for our employers or for our favorite brands to extract. It's also this broader sort of cult of productivity that tells us that our lives can be optimized, enhanced, and made more efficient by applying the logic of the market economy to everything that we do. In essence, the attention economy is a combination of forces that are constantly telling us that the here and now, the present moment of reality, our embodied experiences in the real world are not enough and either must be optimized or must be escaped or must be cultivated and curated, all for this sort of broader hidden logic of commerce and of capital. So why should we resist the attention economy? Because, as Odell puts it, it's making us all unhappy, and it's destroying the natural physical world that we rely on for life. There's a very clear line to be drawn between the attention economy, the sort of logic of applying, market forces to ourselves and to our everyday lives, and, for instance, the realities of climate change, right? And just to draw a little bit from what Odell writes about in the book, this book is about how to hold open what she calls a place in the sun for lived realities and for the sort of the vagaries of everyday existence. She says, I want this not only for writers and artists, but for any person who perceives life to be more than an instrument and therefore something that cannot be optimized. She continues, solitude, observation, and simple conviviality should be recognized not only as ends in and of themselves, but inalienable rights belonging to anyone lucky enough to be alive. She continues on the next page, the point of doing nothing, as I define it, isn't to return to work refreshed and ready to be more productive, but rather to question what we currently perceive as productive. The ultimate goal of doing nothing is to wrest our focus from the attention economy and replant it in the public physical realm. She says, I am opposed to the way that corporate platforms buy and sell our attention, as well as to designs and uses of technology that enshrine a narrow definition of productivity and ignore the local, the carnal, and the poetic. The villain here is not necessarily the internet, Odell says, or even the idea of social media. It is the invasive logic of commercial social media and its financial incentive to keep us in a profitable state of anxiety, envy, and distraction. And I think that's a good encapsulation, those past few passages I just read, of the why behind the book and of what she's really trying to get at in terms of resisting the attention economy. The author, Jenny Odell, is an artist and a writer from the San Francisco Bay Area, and she places emphasis on the natural and built environment of the San Francisco Bay region, the broader sort of bioregion, as a vital anchor for her life and for her growing awareness of her place in the world. She describes a number of parks, a number of natural aspects of the Bay Area that really provide the book with a clear sense of place and a sense of, commitment to and dedication to the natural world. And the plants and the animals and the geography of the Bay Area are key characters in Odell's book. And that was something I really enjoyed. She describes all sorts of different birds, the night heron, which is a particular sort of unique looking type of heron that lived in an area near her residence in the Bay Area. She talks about Old Survivor, which is Oakland, California's only old growth redwood surviving. Out of all the thousands and thousands of redwoods that once lived in the Oakland area within Oakland city limits, it's the only one that survives. She also talks about a particular park where she did a lot of the thinking and the writing that went into the book and to her broader practice. And all of this goes towards her goal of establishing a sense of what she calls bioregionalism, which is just basically this sense of being more intimately connected to the natural world around you and being aware of the environment that currently exists under your feet, outside your walls and windows, alongside the roads that you walk or drive upon, all in the service of providing a more rooted and grounded sense of belonging to place. And so, like I said earlier, the book is pretty skinny. It's a quick read. I read it over the course of probably just a day or two. I actually bought this early on in the pandemic time, early on in lockdown, and read it fairly quickly. It was a great read for those early days. And so in the book, after setting up her thesis in the intro, Odell spends the following chapters exploring what resisting the attention economy and doing nothing would actually look like. And in fact, she prescribes an agenda of not doing nothing, but doing something indeed, but doing it deliberately. So throughout the rest of the book, she explores a number of really interesting topics. One is the history of countercultural communes in America, in North America. Also, examples of what she calls refusal in place. For an example of this, you can think of Melville's story, Bartleby the Scrivener, about this kind of character who's asked to do work in his office, and he just replies, "I would prefer not to." As an example of kind of taking this more almost like radical militant approach to what we're choosing to be productive in, what we're choosing to spend our time and attention and energy on. She also discusses how art practice can invest greater meaning in our attention, in our lived realities, and in our bioregions. Like I said, she herself is an artist. She gave some really interesting examples from her own art practice. And then she also kind of explores how people can make more intentional choices about how we view the people in the world around us in a way that gives respect to ourselves and our communities and what she calls the more than human world. So she concludes by suggesting that we embark on a little bit of an agenda that she describes towards the end of the intro. She says, "I suggest that we withdraw our attention and use it instead to restore the biological and cultural ecosystems where we forge meaningful identities, both individual and collective." There's a lot in there, a lot to unpack. You got to sort of read the book to fully understand it, but it's a worthwhile exploration. She goes on and she ultimately says, "I learned through the process of writing and researching this book the importance of doing something." So the title is a little bit of a misnomer, but in an interesting way. And she concludes the intro saying, "One thing I have learned about attention is that certain forms of it are contagious. When you spend enough time with someone who pays close attention to something, if you were hanging out with me, it would be birds, you inevitably start to pay attention to some of the same things. I've also learned that patterns of attention, what we choose to notice and what we do not, are how we render reality for ourselves and thus have a direct bearing on what we feel is possible at any given time. I think that's a really critical passage, this idea of what we pay attention to as being the way we render reality and thus understand the world and our place in it. That's a really critical component of the book and of sort of the broader themes and ideas that it espouses. So like I said, I bought and read this during the early days of the pandemic, which forced us all to go very deep into our place. None of us were going anywhere. We were all staying very local. For my wife and I, that meant here in our apartment in Northwest Washington, where we're perched on the edge of a little bit of a valley, like a creek valley here that drains down into the Potomac. And that it gave me time and space to kind of think about what that means in my specific location here, as part of this watershed that drains down into the Potomac, that eventually heads into the Chesapeake Bay, that goes on into the Atlantic Ocean, sort of situating myself and the broader community in this big ecosystem. That's a really interesting thing to consider. And like as I was kind of describing, one concrete way that this book had an impact on me was helping me to better engage and engage more thoughtfully with my bioregion, whether that's taking notice of the birds outside my window and having some books around where I can identify them and sort of understand better about their lives and their migrations and how they operate and how they look. Whether it's, like I said, the Chesapeake Bay watershed, of which I am a resident, or even sort of more deeply than that and more human related, understanding that I and my entire community live on what was formerly Piscataway people land, the land of the Piscataway Nation and specifically the Nacotchtank people. Thinking about those who came before us and those who lived in a very particular life way with the land for many, many centuries, that has now been overtaken by a very different life way. That's been a really interesting way that this book has sparked new thinking for me, and I highly recommend it for everyone. It's a great way, it's a great quick read, great way to understand a little bit more about how we spend our time and our attention and how we use our minds to create the world around us. If you liked the movie on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, which was about how social media companies were really designed from the get-go to kind of manipulate and shape and commercialize people's attention, you will enjoy this book because it touches on a lot of the same themes, but in a little bit more of a broad and holistic way, not as narrowly tailored just to kind of Facebook and Instagram like that movie was. So highly recommend How to Do Nothing. Go pick it up at your local bookstore, buy it on bookshop.org. You'll be glad you did. Thanks again for watching and hope to see you around. Thanks.